This is Business Rockstars. I'm Brittany Whitney, and my guest today is Anna Sheffield, founder of Anna Sheffield Fine Jewelry and Bing Bang NYC. Anna, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So for those who are not familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to start your companies.
Okay. I actually started in art, which was sort of the perfect, most magical way to enter into a business or entrepreneurship, in my opinion, or maybe for me. But I started my career as a sculptor. I went to school for sculpture and I trained in fine art, and I learned a lot of the techniques for making jewelry, among other technical skills. But I started to make jewelry sort of as an aside when I would be in my studio and kind of working on art and thinking about, what else could I do with these skills, with my time, with my hands, with my energy, or things that I could move through a little more quickly than art, which sometimes takes a little bit more like energy and sort of devotion. So I started making jewelry in that way, which was in about 2001 in San Francisco in my art studio. And then over time, it kind of evolved into the first business that I founded, which was Bing Bang Jewelry. So I started out with the costume jewelry brand, and in the beginning, it was all very much handmade, and I did everything in my studio myself. And then that was my kind of learning and my entry into the space where I, over time, sort of built that business as a brand. And then much later started my fine jewelry line.
What was the inspiration behind starting your fine jewelry business?
Well, I had been doing Bing Bang for about 6 or 7 years at the time, and I was loving it. And it started out as, like I mentioned, very artisanal, like every single thing was handmade. And then it became more of a brand, and I was learning about all of those things, like the branding, the marketing, partnerships, collaborations, and things like this. And I had done a fine jewelry collaboration with Marc Jacobs under the Bing Bang moniker. And that was the first time I ever worked with diamonds. And it was kind of a mind-blowing experience for someone who was very much a metalsmith up to that point.
Right.
So I had started doing the fine jewelry for that collection and kind of got hooked. And I also felt like as I was growing, I'd started Bing Bang in my 20s, and it's still like a very young brand, and it kind of maintains that ethos. But as I was kind of getting more interested in like things that I could keep forever and like working with more like austere materials, like, and especially like the learning that I had through the process of the collaboration with diamonds, really wanted to do something that was kind of more in that tier. And so I started my brand in 2009. So it's about 10 years this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And how would you describe your fine jewelry line?
Well, what we say is that it's a women-led, design-driven fine jewelry brand, and the impetus is to make fine jewelry for people's most important moments. So I look at them as sort of meaningful modern-day talismans. But also we do what I call ceremonial, which is engagement rings and wedding bands, but extending that idea out to like the idea that when you get fine jewelry, it's always sort of a ceremonious thing, whether it's a gift or it's something that you purchase for yourself at a moment in time that you want to mark with that sort of amulet.
Absolutely. And tell us about your sustainable practices in fine jewelry, and why is it so important to you and your business?
I mean, as a person, I very much value that like resources are limited, and that as a company you have a unique opportunity to investigate sustainability and also ethical practice. So with fine jewelry, there's so many ways that it can go wrong, and there are a few ways that it can go right, and a lot of that requires innovation. So we started out obviously with recycled metals, which is one of the easiest ways to proceed with sustainability in a collection like mine. So recycled gold, and also, I've figured out a way to incorporate also reclaimed diamonds. So like all the tiny melly in the collection is reclaimed. So it comes from breakout,
Amazing.
which is it's like a tiny little thing, but we measure. And so by the end of the year, we can know how many carats of diamonds like we have taken from reuse versus like new mine.
And I want to go back when you first started your businesses. What were the challenges you faced then, and how are they different than the challenges you're facing today as your business is expanding?
That's a great question. I feel like on the technical side, you're always learning to evolve as the company changes. So as we started with DTC, I had one store in New York, and we recently expanded that and moved into a different neighborhood where I started in the Lower East Side. It's a much smaller, like sort of community, and I'm now more central, like right above Soho. So I learn a lot I've learned a lot as I've gone through the evolution of like our direct consumer business, and like how do we serve the needs of people like remotely, digitally, like how do we express our same creative um, vision as well as our like values and our like unique selling propositions like in a digital space versus like in a physical space. So I feel like there's always new things that you're kind of having to adapt to and to and also to like glean from like what your feedback is that you're getting. But I think that like, you know, when I started my business, Instagram didn't even exist. So like at the time you were very much geared towards like looking at meeting with editors and writers and trying to get coverage in magazines. And now it's like you kind of create your own content. So like that's been an amazing evolution. And I actually really love that because like as a creative person, getting to tell the story in all those different ways is it's a wonderful layer to having the brand.
Tell us about your give back programs.
I started about, I think it was 2014. It's been about 5 years since I started the Give Back program for our company that's specific to the brand. But I grew up in New Mexico, and I really wanted to do something that kind of shed a light on not only the artistry that comes out of there, like the native communities, as well as just the people that are from New Mexico, like artisans, and also to sort of create some sort of connection between what we make and where things come from. And so like really focusing on the culture and the preservation of habitat and really just shining a light on like how all of that kind of informed my unique perspective on jewelry. So I started by forming a fund called the Future Heritage Fund. And with the Future Heritage Fund, I have two different collections. There's one collection that's like my ring, which is like turquoise with gold, and they're my designs. And then I also take vintage designs and even sometimes work with contemporary artists to like evolve like a silver piece of jewelry into something that incorporates gold and reclaimed diamonds, or even turning something into a new piece of jewelry, like turning a brooch into a ring or a broken clip-on into like a cool new earring. So that's kind of been the way that I started the pieces that we sell. And then when we sell anything from those collections, a portion goes back to the fund.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So the idea behind it was really to get into that preservation of culture. So future heritage being that like the culture there is so specific and precious, and also the resources, like a lot of turquoise comes from New Mexico. So I wanted to really shine a light on that. So we give to a variety of organizations there, whether it's habitat preservation or I fund scholarships at the American Indian Art College there. So that's been really amazing and fulfilling and wonderful for me to be able to tell that story.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself that intuition is a really important aspect of building a business. I feel like it's often said that like you should have more hard facts or you should have a business plan, which I never have had. That you need to, you know, do all of this research and you need to like listen to what people tell you. I feel like for me, like some of the worst decisions I ever made were when I was listening too much to what people told me I should do versus following my intuition. And I think that there's a lot to be said for what seems right and feels right to you at the time, particularly when you're building a brand that is like, you know, by and of your creative nature.
Absolutely. And where do you see your business in the next 5 or 10 years?
I would like to see us growing in a way that that is sort of in keeping with what I set up. So like a steady growth and like a pace that doesn't feel unnecessarily rushed or too broad. But I like the idea of expanding our retail presence, whether it's with more pop-ups like we did before we opened the LA store. I did a pop-up for about 4 months, which was wonderful. And it was a great way to sort of get to know people in the community in LA and to find out like, you know, what the culture here is like interested in and like what kind of alliances we could form. So I would love to continue to do that in marketplaces where we see interest for our brand. But I also love the idea of kind of growing our e-com presence. Obviously, that's where it's at. And there's so much that can be done now with the way people communicate digitally.
Yeah.
Whereas when we started, it was very much like, you know, is someone actually going to go on our website and purchase a diamond sight unseen?
Right.
And we're starting to kind of figure that out. Like, how do we communicate this to the best of our ability? How do we become available to people that are trying to reach out in different time zones or in different ways? Like, if you're selling something almost via DM, it requires another layer of like communication to how you would reply to someone via email or on the phone or in person. So I see us kind of like finding ways to keep knitting that together and to excel at it, because the one great thing about being the size of business that we are is that we're nimble and we're able to kind of address these things and creatively and as they come up.
Absolutely. And if people want to purchase your jewelry, where can they go?
They can go to my website, which is annasheffield.com, and Bing Bang is bingbangyc.com. So if you're looking for something a little lower price point or a little more fashion forward, you have that option. And we also have 2 stores. There's a bricks and mortar in New York City on Bleecker Street, and then we're on Melrose at La Cienega in Los Angeles.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
It was a pleasure to meet
Thanks
you.
for having me.
This is Business Rockstars. That was my amazing guest, Anna Sheffield, founder of Anna Sheffield Fine Jewelry and Bing Bang NYC.